Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and in this video here, we're going to be revisiting the PSP yet again, although you might be confused because on screen here, I'm not showing the PSP, absolutely not. I'm actually showing the PlayStation Vita, or this here is actually the PlayStation TV or Vita TV, but the process and steps are really going to be about the same here. I'm going to be showing you all, if you have a modified PlayStation Vita, PlayStation TV, or Vita TV, how you can set it up with the ARK-4 custom firmware over on the ePSP side. That is the emulated PSP built into the Vita, which is typically unlocked using something such as Adrenaline. Now, if that sounds like a mouthful, it's because, well, frankly it is, but by the time this video is over, you should be able to take your modified PlayStation Vita, PlayStation TV, or Vita TV and be able to have access to the ePSP on there through Adrenaline, but also be running the ARK-4 custom firmware, which is the most modern and currently up-to-date version of the custom firmware for the PSP. Now, I will say as well too, there might be many people watching this who already have a modified Vita and they have Adrenaline already set up, and they might be wondering what to do at that point. Well, don't worry, this video is going to be all-encompassing. I was originally going to tell people to refer to the Adrenaline tutorial I did years ago, but we're just going to do it, so if you have Adrenaline already set up, you'll be able to follow along, and I'll tell you which steps that you can skip. And if you do not have Adrenaline and you don't know what I'm talking about, you could watch along with the whole video and you should be able to get to the finish line by the end, where you'll be able to access the PSP something like this built into the Vita. And one last point on the Vita itself, this does work across all models of the PlayStation Vita and Vita TV, PlayStation TV, whatever you're referring to it, as long as it has been already modified. But from here on out, I'm just going to refer to it as the Vita unless I have to specify otherwise. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get the prerequisites out of the way. Of course, here you are going to need your Vita system. Like I said, it could be any system as long as it has been modified, and it will need to be a pre-modified Vita. Now, if you check down below in the description, I will have a video tutorial covering how you can take your PS Vita, which is stock, and mod it up and get it up and running similar to this one. You are going to have a modified PlayStation Vita. Secondly, it is going to help to have a computer on hand so that we can download some files and transfer them to and from the Vita. If you want to use something else such as your phone or a tablet, up to you, but you're going to be on your own for that specific aspect. I'm going to be covering this on PC because it's just going to be easier there with a full desktop. And finally, you are going to need a way to make sure your storage can be connected to your computer in some way to get files transferred to and from it. This is going to be for your games, applications, and all that stuff here. So if you're going to be using a standard handheld Vita, you can go over the network, you can use your USB cable, or if you use something such as a SD to Vita adapter, you can just unplug the SD card and pop it into your computer using an adapter. Otherwise, if you're on the PlayStation TV or Vita TV, you're going to have to go over your network, or like I said, you might have to just pull out the micro SD card from your adapter while the system is off and connect it directly to your computer. With all that said, let's go ahead and move over to our computer because we are going to have to download and transfer over several files, so let's go ahead and get that started. The first thing we're going to need here is, of course, the star of the show, which is going to be ARK-4. Now, this is going to be linked along with everything else down below in the description of this video here, and this here, as it states, is a custom firmware for the PSP and PS Vita. They state that here because this originally had its life on the Vita through the ePSP on there, just, you know, itself being a custom firmware that you can use. Now, you're more than welcome to check out the features and such that are on here, because if you are using Adrenaline and you're currently happy with it and you might be wondering why you want to run ARK on there, you might want to look at the features and see if any of these appeal to you. Otherwise, if you're wanting to know about the actual installation instructions, we're going to be going on the installation on PS Vita right here, and we're going to be using the Adrenaline setup right here. There's only a few steps here, but I am having a few extra downloads and such just to help out with a few things that I ran into and to have it be a little cleaner by the end. Now, once you've given this a read, in order to download ARK-4, you're going to have to go to the releases section and you want to click on the latest release right here, which is just going to be prominently displayed. Once you click on this, you can go ahead and read through the changelog and such which is available, and then you can click on the ARK-4 zip file and save this somewhere you can easily find it. The next thing you're going to need is Adrenaline from the Flow, which this here is going to be an application you can download if you do not have this already installed. And that's one thing to state here. If you do already have Adrenaline installed, you can skip this download and installation, since you don't need to re-download and reinstall Adrenaline. But if you are needing to install this, I'd recommend recommend giving this a quick read over for the first time, and then once you read this over, you can go over to the releases section and make sure you download the latest build of Adrenaline. You want to save this VPK somewhere you can easily find it. The next download is going to be optional, but I am recommending this here not only because of the documentation, but it is going to make booting into ARK easier by the end, which I do recommend just like the other ones here, giving this a read, making sure you understand it and see what this does, and then once you are ready to download the Adrenaline Bubble Manager, you can click on Releases and make sure you download the latest release of the Adrenaline Bubble Manager.vpk. Save it somewhere you can easily find it. Now the next download we're going to grab here is going to be Auto Plugin 2, because there are going to be a couple of plugins to set on here which would be recommended and should make things a bit better here by the end. Just like before, you can go ahead, read up on Auto Plugin 2, see what it does, see what might interest you on here, and once you are ready to give this a download, you can go to the Releases section and go ahead and download the latest build of Auto Plugin 2, the VPK, just save it somewhere you can easily find it. Now all the GitHub downloads are completed, and I will say here, if you already have Adrenaline installed and running on your system, you can skip this download right here, but if you do not, you are going to need to download the PSP 6.61 official firmware. I know it's kind of funny that we're doing that despite using custom firmware on here, but this is going to be needed to set up Adrenaline. In order to download this here, I will have Darth Sterney's firmware archive linked down below in the description, in which you can go to the PSP official firmware section. You do not want the Go firmware. You want the standard official firmware. It's going to be firmware 6.61, and you can go ahead and download this from the download links. At the time of recording this, the mega links are down, but the archive ones work. Just go ahead and click on download and save that somewhere you can easily find it. Now once we have all of our downloads completed, it should look something like this. Now do keep in mind, again, if you already have Adrenaline set up on your system, you do not need the Adrenaline VPK or the 661 PBP file. However, you are going to need the other three here. ARK will be required, and the other two will just make things a little easier for us. Now, in order to set this up here for copy, you just need to grab your ARK-4.zip file, right-click this, and extract it into its own folder. I'm going to be using 7-zip for this. We no longer need the zip since we have the ARK-4 folder, but once you open this up, this is how it's going to look, and there's just going to be a couple things that we need to copy over. So now with that extracted and our file's almost ready to copy, let's go ahead and set this up on our Vita. On the Vita itself, you are going to need to open up Vita Shell. And once you open up Vita Shell, you should be greeted to a screen like this. Now, how you're going to hook it up depends on what your setup will be. If you're using a standard Vita like a 1000 or 2000, the handheld model, you can press the start button, and then you can go down to the select button options, and you can either change this to USB or FTP. Now, if you're going to be doing this through USB, make sure your USB device is set to your memory card. Then you can press the start button yet again, press the select button, and once a USB connection message is showing on your screen, you should be able to connect a USB cable from your Vita to your computer. Otherwise, if you have to use your network, this works on all models of the Vita as long as you're connected to your local network, either wired or wirelessly. You can hit the start button yet again, make sure memory card is selected, and change the select button to FTP. Close out of this. Now press the select button on your system and make sure it is still running at this page here. It's now going to run your FTP server, which you can just keep up and running when we connect to it. For the file copy, this is what we'll do, and this is going to be if you're hooking up your micro SD card directly or you're just hooking up your system through USB, whichever local storage option you're using here. You should see your drive located right here, and once you go into this here, you should see a series of folders looking similar to this. Now what I like to do is in the root of here, I like to create a VPK directory, and if you don't have one, go ahead, right click, create a new folder, and you can make it and just call it VPK. And from here, all you need to do is grab all the files themselves, including the 661 PBP, and copy and paste them over. I know the PBP file doesn't go here, but don't worry, we're going to move that later on the system itself. The next thing we're going to need is this ARK-4 directory, in which you can go ahead and open it up, and the two folders we need are going to be ARK_01234 and ARK_loader. Go ahead, grab these two, right click, copy them, and then you can paste them here next to all your other installs. Again, we are going to be moving these later on, but on the Vita itself. Once those have been moved over, we can go ahead, exit out of here, right click, eject our USB drive, and move over to the system again. Now, if you're going to be doing this over FTP over your network, you are going to need some kind of FTP client, and for this, I recommend if you're on Windows, I personally use WinSCP, and if you're following along, you can just follow along with me on that. But if you want to use a different client, up to you. Now, if you're going to use your network, what you can do is within WinSCP, on the left is going to be wherever your computer storage is. So I've navigated over to a folder I have with all of these downloads here. And over on here, you want to create a new tab, create a new remote tab. And once this pops up, we can create a new site, click on FTP for the protocol, no encryption is fine. Anonymous login is okay, but now we need the host name and the port number. Now remember I said to keep your Vita up and running, it's because we're going to need this here. You're going to need the IP address, which is the set of numbers prior to the colon right here, and you're of course going to need that port number. So go ahead and just punch this information into WinSCP or whatever program you're using. Once you have your host name and you punch in your port number as 1337, go ahead, click on login, and as you can see, you should be able to see that you're connected to your Vita over on the right. From here, you need to navigate to UX0, scroll down and look for a VPK directory, and if you do not have this, again, right click around here and you can create a new directory and call it VPK. But inside the VPK directory, we're just going to grab all of these files here, so the 661 PBP as well as the VPKs, and we're going to right click and upload them. Hit OK. And of course, since it's uploading, it'll just take a few moments to copy everything over. And here we go. Once these have been copied over, we can now go into the ARK-4 directory, and there's going to be ARK-01234 and ARK_loader. Grab both these folders, right click, upload them, and hit OK. And once these have been uploaded, at this point, all the installation stuff should be copied over. We don't have any games yet or anything, but that's fine. So with that, we can just go ahead, exit all the way back out here, do the same here, and now we can close out of WinSCP. And we can now do most of the rest of the steps for setup on our Vita. Now that our file copies have been completed, let's go ahead and press the circle button to cancel out of here, and now we need to navigate down to the UX0 path, and we need to scroll all the way down to that VPK folder, and enter that folder. And you're going to see several VPKs that we're going to need to install. So the first one to install is of course going to be Adrenaline. Tap the X button on here, say yes to install this, and say yes yet again to continue with the installation. Now that that's done, the next thing we can install will be the Adrenaline Bubble Manager, so it's going to be the exact same thing as before. Go ahead, go through the process, and let it install. And the last thing we'll need will be Auto Plugin 2. Exact same thing as before, just like any other APK file. Go ahead and wait for this to install. So now with everything installed, we can go ahead and select each of these VPKs with the square button, hit the triangle button, go down to delete, and say yes, since we're not going to need them, and we can go ahead and save that space. Now remember there were these files and folders here that I said we could move. We're going to work on moving one of them. Highlight the 661.ppp file, hit the triangle button, and go down to move, and tap X. It will say it copied one file, but it is going to be a move. Now go up here to the two dots, hit X, and scroll all the way to the top in UX0, but go down to the app folder and enter the app folder. Look for one you should see called PSP MU CFW. And inside of here, you're going to hit the triangle button and now paste this over. It's going to move it over exactly where it needs to be. So now with that done, we can exit out of here, close out of Vita Shell completely, and take a look at our new applications. You should see Adrenaline right there jumping and ready to go, but you should also have the Adrenaline Bubbles Manager as well as Auto Plugin 2. Now for our first step, let's go ahead and run through Adrenaline, because we are going to need to set this up and install it. This should be the last time I say it here, but if you've already set up and installed Adrenaline, you can skip this step and you can move over to the next step, which is going to be installing ARK-4. But for now, we do need to get this sorted out, which is pretty easy to do. You're going to want to open up Adrenaline and fire it up. Now it might do something like that, and we are going to fix that later, but we can navigate back over, open up Adrenaline a second time, and this time around it should actually launch. If you see this screen, that's a good sign. Now it's going to tell you that it needs to install the 6.61 firmware onto the memory card, which is exactly what we want to do. Tap the X button and it's going to load up that PBP file that we just downloaded and transferred over. So we didn't have to worry about the Vita doing that work. I've done it in this exact order of operations because there's sometimes where the Vita is just not able to download that firmware update separately, so we went ahead and did the work for it. but now you can see it's doing the rest of the extraction right here. You just need to wait here for a little bit and wait for everything to extract out where it needs to go. And as you can see, the firmware has been installed, so now we can tap the X button to boot up the PSP XMB. Once you do that, it will cut to black and wait for a few moments for this to set up. So now would you look at that, you have a full PSP available at your fingertips. Through here, just go through the rest of the process just like you're setting up a standard PSP. Now once you've set everything up, it should look something like this here, which you can check this out, press the select button on your system, and look at that, you have access to the Adrenaline VSH menu. So essentially what you have here on your modified Vita is you have unlocked the hidden PSP emulator on the Vita, but now you have access to it fully, so you've pretty much unlocked and installed custom firmware on your ePSP all at the same time. It is exciting, but let me actually come over here, just make this a little nicer to look at. I'm just going to change the theme. I think it was something with marketing the PSP, but honestly, I really like the blue look right here. Here we go. This is the specific one. So we're going to stick with this, and it should hopefully be a little bit easier on the eyes. So now at this point, the Adrenaline installation has been completed. For that, you can hold down the PlayStation button, and if you come over here, you're going to need to go into the settings. And once the Adrenaline menu comes up, you need to go to Exit PSP EMU Application, and we can now close out of that. There's extra settings you can check out, but we are going to be doing that later. The important thing is we've set up Adrenaline. At this point, we get to install ARK-4. So with that, go back into your Vita shell and open it up. We're now going to need those two folders that I had you transfer over. So go down to the UX0 directory. Inside of here, go down to VPK, and there's going to be the ARK_loader folder. Let's grab that one first. You can go ahead and highlight this by hitting the triangle button while hovering over it. Go down to move, that's okay. Now go up. We're now going to go over to this new folder that's been created called PSP-EMU. This is in the root of UX0. Within PSP-EMU, you're going to need to come in here and we're going to create a new folder. You can hit the triangle button and we're going to create a new folder. And this one is going to be in all uppercase called PSP. And once that's done, inside the PSP folder, we're going to create a new folder yet again, and we're going to call this one Game. All uppercase, all one word. So once that's been created, go into the Game folder. Now hit the triangle button and paste in the ARK_loader folder right there. Now we can go ahead and exit out of this, and there's going to be one more folder that we need. Go down to that VPK directory, and inside here, you should see ARK_01234. The exact same thing with this, you're going to want to move it. Now come back up, we're going to go to PSP-EMU, and inside of here, go to the PSP folder, and next to the game folder, we're going to create a new folder, and this one is going to be called Save Data. All one word, all uppercase. Once it looks like that, hit the R2 button, go into your Save Data directory, and once you're here, hit triangle, and paste this in. And now those two folders are exactly where they need to be. So now once we're back here, you just need to hit the PlayStation button. We're going to close out a Vita shell, and now with those files transferred over, we just need to open up Adrenaline yet again. And this is how we're going to run ARK custom firmware. Just like before, if you get this double tap, don't worry, we will be fixing that up here soon. But open up Adrenaline and wait for it to boot. Here we go, we should be booted into the ePSP, and once we see the XMB, check this out, you can now go down to the memory stick section, and inside of here you should have one game, which is the ARK loader. Go ahead and tap the X button here to launch it. Now after a few seconds, it should bring you over here, loading ARK-4, it's going to detect everything it needs to, and then it's going to do a soft reboot in which it will bring you back to the XMB, and now check this out, if you press the select button, you should be able to see the VSH menu is a little bit different, and as you can see right here, if you go to the advanced menu, you do now have access to this, which means you're running ARK custom firmware. So congratulations, you have been able to edit it. Let me actually work on getting this to look a little bit nicer here on video. So here we go, we can tweak the foreground and background colors as well as change the theme. The menu design, I personally like the new one, but if you want to switch it to something a little more classic, you can do that. And for the main menu, I'm personally going to change it to advanced because that is what I enjoy on here. Now once that's all done, we can go back, we can exit out, and even if you come over to the extra section, check it out, you have a few extra options here, which you did not have before. So that means again that this ARK-4 custom firmware has been installed. congratulations. However, we're not completely done here, because even though this has been installed, essentially every single time you boot up Adrenaline, you'd have to come into memory stick and you'd have to relaunch the ARK loader. Now, unfortunately, there's no way around that, but there is a way where we can quite literally create a shortcut and auto boot into it. So for that, that's what we're going to be working on with the rest of this video, as well as some usage and such on how to use this if you have not used Adrenaline and therefore ARK-4 on a Vita. So with that, we can go ahead and hold down the PlayStation button on our controller, go to settings, exit PSPMU application, and close out of here, then come back to the rest of our applications. Now that we have this sorted, let's go ahead and actually add in some plugins that should help out. For this, we can go ahead and launch Auto Plugin 2. To do this here, just go ahead, launch it like any other application, and wait for everything to load in. Once you're over here, it might also do some updates and such, and let it do the spring cleaning it needs to, but once that's all done, you can go down to the PSP plugins section, and the one that I do recommend installing here is going to be called NPDRM Free from QuickRazor87. Once you're in here, I'd recommend using this one here that's been modified by Lucid1. In order to install this here, you can tap the X button on it, and wait for it to do the install process. Now, I'm recommending using this plugin simply because I had tried this on my own when testing this. I noticed that there was some games, and mainly some PS1 games, that simply would not launch successfully until I had this plugin sorted. So hopefully, to save you all some trouble and headache, this should help out. Now that that's been completed, we can press circle yet again, and go back up to the Vita plugins section. Now go to install plugins, and there's going to be one that we need here, which is going to be Adrenaline by the official Flow to fix double touch. And that is pretty self-explanatory. Just tap the X button on here, wait for it to load up. It's going to give this explanation right here. Tap the X button yet again, and tap X to install it. And once that's been installed, congratulations, that should hopefully fix up PS1 and DLC issues as well as that double touch. We can now exit out of here and go to exit. And once this does exit, it is going to ask us to reboot the system, so tap the X button and wait for your system to reboot. Once the system does reboot, we can scroll down here, and we're going to go into Adrenaline yet again. Once Adrenaline launches, go ahead and give it a few moments, and here we're going to go ahead and set up our plugins properly, because it did install them for older custom firmwares, but ARK-4 uses a slightly different system for setting up plugins, but thankfully they make it pretty easy to import them in. For this here, once you're in Adrenaline, go to memory stick and launch the ARK loader. Just like before, give it a few seconds to launch. And here we go, once it soft reboots, press the select button, and from here, you're going to need to go into the advanced VSH menu. Once you're in here, highlight the import classic plugins option and tap the X button here. It's now going to do a bit of a reboot on your ePSP, so just wait for this to complete. And here we go, once that's all loaded in, check it out. You can navigate over here, and if you go down to the plugins manager, if you come in here, you should see NPDRM free mod on, NP loader mod is on, and you're also going to see the same ones down here. These two are going to be for your VSH, and these two are going to be in-game plugins. So everything is looking good. We have all four of them here, and all of them are enabled. So now with our plugins done, let's go ahead, close out of Adrenaline yet again. I'm going to exit the application there. Now the last installation type step here is going to be related to creating a bubble, because you know how we have to go into Adrenaline and then launch ARK every single time? Again, like I said, we cannot do away with that, but there's a way that we can create a shortcut to it here, quite literally by making a bubble. In order to do this step here, go into the Adrenaline Bubbles Manager and give it a launch. Now once it comes up, it is going to say that this plugin has been installed and it now needs to restart the Vita. So just like it says here, let it do its thing, tap the X button, and wait for your Vita to restart. Now it does give us a nice warning here about opening up Adrenaline again, and we'll make sure we do that. Now once the Vita restarts again, we are just going to go into Adrenaline and make sure that launches. We don't have to launch ARK-4 on here, but we just need to make sure that our Adrenaline bubble and install are still working. As you can see, that's looking good. They are still running and operating, so we can go ahead and close out of Adrenaline, go here, exit PSPMU application, And that's it. So now we can go back into the Adrenaline Bubbles Manager, just go ahead and launch it like before, except this time around we don't have to do a reboot right off the bat. Now in here it's going to give us a list of all of the games and applications that are on the ePSP side of house. So you might already have some PSP games, some PS1 games, or maybe even some Homebrew here if you have not used this before. First, we could go into the extra settings by pressing the Start button and make sure that the bubble ID has been set to Game ID. Now once it's been set, press the Start button yet again, and we should be good at that point. Now to create our bubble, make sure you have highlighted the ARK loader bubble and tap the X button on it. It's now going to bring this up, which will be the title for your bubble. So you can keep it ARK loader, but I'm personally going to change it to ARK-4, just to have it be maybe a little more descriptive, but also shorter. You know, I was looking way too long for a hyphen, so -4, there we go. And once you're done, you can hit OK, give it a few moments here, and it's now going to convert the necessary resources into creating that bubble. And there we go. Once that's all done, we can now press the PlayStation button, close out of here, and now we come back to our live screen. Check it out. You should see a new bubble, which is going to be ARK-4 or ARK loader, whatever you might have called it. Now in order to run this, you just need to go ahead, tap it, open it up, and this is how it's going to look. So you're going to be at a little bit of a black screen here, but once it loads up after a few seconds, here we go, loading ARK-4, it's going to do the magic needed, and as you can see, it's now going to boot up the XMB itself, and we should now be in our ePSP, but this time around we're running ARK-4 custom firmware. So again, it's not going to be perfect in the way that you can just automatically carve out whatever custom firmware is in Adrenaline and replace it with ARK-4, but we can at least make a shortcut that boots us directly into a ARK-4 ePSP. Now at this point, congratulations, you have successfully been able to install Adrenaline, set it up, put the proper plugins you need to on there, and even create a shortcut on your live screen for ARK firmware itself. But now you might be wondering about some of the extra features and what you can actually do on here, not just the ePSP and custom firmware in general, but also with ARK itself. So for this, I am going to need to go back to Vita Shell. So this time around, you can just tap the PlayStation button and you can exit to the PSP EMU application, close out of that. This time around, we're now going to be going up to Vita Shell, open this up, and just like before, we're going to connect it to our PC with whichever method we're using and get some files transferred over. Now, in order to do the file copy here, I am going to show you all how you can get a PSP ISO working, a piece of Homebrew such as an application or even an emulator working, a PS1 game that has been converted, and finally, I'm going to show you all the themes in the ARK-4 custom launcher. In order to do this over USB, it might require a little bit of trickery once you have your Vita connected, but you'll need to open up the directory itself, and for this, you are going to need to navigate to the PSP EMU folder. And once you're inside of here, let's go ahead and get the themes copied over. This is going to be within that ARK-4 folder, and you're going to see a themes folder right here. This is optional, but it's cool to play around with in the custom launcher if you want to. You can go ahead, highlight this folder, right click, copy it out. Now close out of here, and we're going to right click and paste this into the root of our PSP EMU folder. Now you might have already noticed there's something strange here, in which we definitely made some folders here and they're not showing up. This is the odd thing about going through USB or checking out your micro SD card directly. So in order to fix this up here, at least temporarily, now if you're doing this within Windows, I'm using Windows 11, you can click on the ellipse right here, you can click on the options option. Now once your folder options show up, click on the View tab, go down to Hide Protected Operating System Files Recommended, uncheck this, and for this warning here, you're going to say yes, and don't worry, we're only temporarily doing this. So hit Apply, and as you can see, there's probably going to be some other hidden files and folders that show up on your desktop or wherever you're at, but you should see we now have the PSP folder as well as the temp folder, which did not show up before. Click on OK here because we are going to need this PSP folder. Now to copy over PS1 games, you're going to need to navigate to the PSP folder within PSP EMU, go into the game folder, and right next to where your ARK loader installation is, we're going to grab whichever PS1 game we have, and these need to be repacked into PBP format. They cannot just be an ISO that's been copied and pasted. I do have a video showing how you can convert PS1 games to work on the PSP, so you do need to convert them. But once you have that set up, you can just go ahead, drag and drop your folder, which has the eboot.pbp in there. And once that's all been copied over, that's your PS1 game. Next up is going to be any PSP applications, homebrew, or emulators. They should typically come in a folder like this, and if I check out my PSP filer right here, you should see there's an eboot PBP, and there's probably going to be some other files and folders here corresponding with it. Once you have that sorted, you can just right-click the folder itself that has your homebrew, copy it out, and within the PSP emu directory, you need to go into PSP, game, right-click, and paste it right here. And finally, for any of your ISO files, these are going to be PSP games, like UMD-based games which have been dumped to ISO. Again, if you want to know how to do this with your own collection, I do have a video showing how you can back up and play your own PSP games. However, on here, if you have one already backed up, such as my copy of Luxor, you do need to copy this over as well. In order to do this, again, within that PSP emu directory, you need an ISO folder. If you do not have one, right-click and create a new folder, all uppercase one word, call it ISO. And inside of the ISO folder, you're going to copy and paste your ISO files. These can be ISO files, CSO files, JSO, whichever type of compression you're using or not, it's up to you. But this is where your PSP ISO files in general will go. Once those have all been copied over, we can right-click, eject our drive right here, and one last thing, we can also go back into this, go to our folder options, go to view, and make sure you enable hide protected operating system files yet again, hit apply, and that should fix it all for you on your computer. Now, if you do this over FTP, thankfully the file copy option is the same. You just need to make sure your FTP server has launched and then navigate over to your computer while this is running. Just like before, WinSCP, FTP, no encryption, type in your host name, port number is elite, and then use an anonymous login. And once you log in here, you can just do the same thing. It's going to be in your UX0 directory. Go down, look for PSP emu, and the nice thing is if you go through this route here, you don't have to worry about the hidden files and folders like you did through the USB method. Just like I covered, within the PSP directory, the game directory next to ARK loader, this is where you're going to transfer any PS1 games or any homebrew, including things such as applications and emulators. Once you have those uploaded, that is the directory they need to be at. Once you have those uploaded, you should be good. Now, in order to copy over your ISOs, just like I said, we can exit out of here. Next to your PSP directory within PSP emu, you can right click and create a new directory, and we're going to call this one ISO, all uppercase one word. Inside of there, that's where you transfer over any of your ISO games. These ones specifically are PSP discs, which you have backed up into ISO format already. It's also worth noting the last transfer we could do is within this PSP emu directory. Go into the ARK-4 directory that you have extracted out, find the themes directory, and you can right click and upload this right here. So it's going to be next to the PSP as well as ISO and SE plugins folder. This is how it should look. So there we go. Once we have everything transferred out, we can just go ahead, exit out here, come back to this section, come back over here. Now we can close out of this. Over at your Vita with everything copied over, of course you can now close out of Vita shell. And now let's go ahead and load up our ARK loader or ARK launcher. Just like any other application, tap into it like that and wait a few seconds. And here we go. Once this loads in, we can navigate down to the memory stick in our game section. And once we're in here, check this out. Let's just run through these one by one. This here is a PSP ISO. So in order to launch this, we just need to tap the X button once it shows up and wait for it to load up. And here we go. It didn't take all too long, but you could see here that it has loaded up already. So that's all good. Now, since we know it's loaded up, I'm just going to tap the PlayStation button. It does bring us here, so I'll have to tap it again. And we're going to go ahead and quit that game. And here we go. Once we're back here, we can go right back into the game section. And inside of here is PSP Filer. This here is, as it states here, a file manager or a filer for the PSP. It's pretty great. It's an older piece of homebrew that I still use to do a few things, but you can go ahead and give this a launch as well. And this would be an example of homebrew, applications, emulators, anything related to that here. So you can see we put it in the right directory, and once we give it a few seconds, it has loaded this in. It looks pretty similar to Vita Shell, just with more pixels, essentially, just more pixelation. So there we go, we have that sorted out. We can close out of that, just like we did before. And the last thing is going to be PS1 games. So in order to get those working, navigate to the memory stick section, and your PS1 game should look something like this. Go ahead, tap the X button. It is going to boot up a little differently, but should hopefully boot up. And here we go. That is a good sign. We got the SCEA logo right here. Let's wait for it to load. So here we go. It is in demo mode, but as you can see, this game is working. So let's go ahead and close out of here. I'm going to tap yes on this, and as you can see, that is how you can run any of your Homebrew or games, applications, anything similar to that. Now, if you've seen, whenever I press the PlayStation button or whenever you do, you bring up this Adrenaline menu right here. Well, this is also worth checking out. So this is the nice benefit of running ARK-4 with Adrenaline. You still get the Adrenaline options. Here, you can check out the main options here, which are pretty self-explanatory. You can navigate using the L1 and R1 buttons on a controller or the left and right shoulder buttons on your handheld. But if we navigate over, we have save states that we can create and load up. There's also many different settings here that which you can check out to your own heart's content. There is a booter right here, which you can go ahead and change these options. I wouldn't necessarily recommend changing them unless you know what you're doing over here. And finally, there's an about section where you can check out and see, well, what exactly this is all about, as well as some nice credits. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of there. Now looking into the ARK specific settings right here, that's going to be within the extras section. And check this out, we can check out the custom firmware settings, which are not available typically on Adrenaline. So once we're in here, we can check these out and you can see what might be available, what you want to enable, disable, whatever there might be. I'm going to go ahead and let you make the decisions on these options here. Secondly, you do have your plugins manager, which we did briefly look at right here, but you can go ahead, make changes to your plugins, remove them, turn them off, do whatever you want to here once they are recognized within Adrenaline's plugin system. The last thing here is going to be the custom launcher, which, well, let's go ahead and give this a custom launch. Now, once we open up the custom launcher, it should look something like this here, in which on the left, you're going to have all of your PSP ISOs. In the middle, you're going to have your PSP Homebrew and applications. On the right, you're going to have your PS1 games, in which you can launch them from here. Now, this is just an alternative launcher you can use if you so wish to. And if you want to change the theme, which I wouldn't blame you on here, you can hit the triangle button, go into the Files section, and once you're inside of here, check out that themes folder we transferred over. Now inside of here, if you want to install a theme, you can go ahead, find whichever theme you want. I personally really liked the black theme. Go into here, find the theme.ark file, tap the X button, go down to install, and wait a few seconds for it to apply. And as you can see, if we now exit out of this, might have to hit triangle, go back to games, you can see here that you do have these same options here, just with a different theme. Now, if you hit the triangle button here, you can of course check out your games, files, which we just saw. You can check out your network settings, so you can even create a FTP server here if you want to, or check for updates. Inside of here, you got your custom firmware settings, which is a lot of what we looked at before, which would also be changed within the recovery menu. You can go into the plugins, which again, that's what we've been working with there. And finally, you also have your settings available here, in which you can tweak some of these just to change how this all looks right here. Now, if you're done with that, you can go ahead and hit exit, and this will just take you back to the XMB itself, which is personally what I prefer. However, if you want to mess around with the custom launcher, you're more than welcome to do that. Either way, that is about it with this video here. So as you can see, we're pretty much done and we're at the end here. You should now at this point not only have Adrenaline already installed and set up, but you should also have your proper plugins set up there, as well as hopefully a loader for ARK itself, in which that way, instead of going into Adrenaline and launching every single time, you just go ahead and go into the ARK launcher, and boom, you have access to your ePSP already running the ARK custom firmware. So that's a pretty nice feature right there. You should also, of course, have your plugins set up there, know where to put your PSP games, your PS1 games, as well as any type of homebrew, such as these two right here. So now you have the power of a PSP with some nice extra features and such built into your Vita, but now unlocked through the Vita or the PlayStation TV or the Vita TV that you're using. So congratulations. At this point now, you should be all situated and sorted when it comes to your need for PSP on the Vita itself. Anyways, that's about it for this video here. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. But as I always say, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone.